All right, in this unit, I'm starting on Unit 5, and what we're going to build is often called a multi or a master detail app or a multi-view app. Multi-view just means, and I think the new terminology would be a multi-scene app, because every page that you can see that's different in your app is called a scene, and those all have to link together somehow. We're going to get an introduction to that here. But we're going to be just doing a master detail application where we get a list and then a second screen that shows us the details for whatever you just click on in the list. And that's a good way to start with multi-views. We'll learn about segues and how to tie them all together. In the last recording, we talked about delegates and protocols, and I cleared it up a little bit. Again, I encourage you to look at some of these, particularly the sources. Not the developer library is complicated, but maybe it can help clarify something for you. This sample is pretty good, and again, there's a guide for developers that may be, and it's Objective-C. I have updated these notes to some extent, but I haven't posted the new versions. Most of it's small, taking out the word array, putting in collections and those kind of stuff to give you a little more flexibility. Anywhere you see iOS Summer 2013, that's a note to myself saying they taught you this in class. That's almost 2 years ago now, so you can imagine how effective that is, and no, it wasn't Swift. So those are probably about due to come out. I wonder if they're teaching a Swift class this summer. I might be able to get smarter in time for next year. So we talked about protocols. We can mix them together, and this is what we talked about, that a table view knows how to scroll and do all of its stuff, but it doesn't know what to display in the cell. Doesn't know where the data is supposed to come from. That's what the delegate takes care of for us, and that's what all this explains, and maybe if you're reading at a slow pace, it might help clear things up for you a little bit. Most of the time, the delegate, whatever it is, takes care of being both the delegate and the data source. It's usually the same thing. You notice in our tip calculator, we drag the delegate and the data source both to the view controller. In this unit, we're going to create something called a table view controller, which is just a more specific view controller. It's more specific because all it has on it is a table view. One big, huge, fills the entire screen, table view. And it's its own class. And so it takes care of a lot of those details for us. So now we have a view or a controller that has a table view in it, but it's its own delegate, if you will. It's not really its own delegate. It's a table view controller. It has a table view that needs a delegate. The controller is the delegate, and they're all packaged nicely together. So that helps. We talked about cell reuse already. Okay, let's create a master detail app. And by the way, this is one I discovered a couple of years ago. Kurup does recordings kind of like mine, but he does them just for their YouTube recordings. He does them just to put them out there. I don't think he's doing them for a class. But he puts them out there, and he's got some good ones. They're now dated because, and I haven't looked to see if he's got any Swift ones out there, but these were where my master detail information came from, at least the starting points. So those are good YouTube videos if you're ever in a mood to not do a whole lot of typing and just kind of watch for a while. Those can really help. And he's got tons of playlists for different topics. So let's create a master detail application. So I'm going to create a brand new application, next code project. But instead of a single view application, we're now going to do a master detail application. Generally, here's a page-based application, so that would be the next step if I have 3 or 4 pages. But last year what we did is went to master detail and then added more views to them and tied them together. You can start with a single and create a new view for it. But let's go to master detail because that's what we're trying to create this time. Give it a name. I think I'll call mine in class 5. If you wish, you can call it, this is going to be kind of our family birthdays list. Whatever. Make sure you're Swift on an iPhone and no core data yet. That's next unit. Which I'm sure will also be fun because I'm sure Swift has turned that all inside out. Park it somewhere. Yes, sir?
What's the Git repository?
Oh, I would turn that off. Git is a source management piece of software. Actually, it's a website that manages your softwares, multiple versions, multiple users, all working on the same thing.
GitHub is a website.
Git is a piece of software that does it. GitHub is the website. Thank you. And this allows you to create basically a Git repository so that you can manage your versions and do all that kind of stuff. I always have grand plans of putting it into the systems implementation class next semester, but it's almost a mini course in itself. Learning how to use Git and GitHub and how do you check out software and how do you check in software and pieces. Every time I go there, it gives me a headache.
I almost think it would be worth it just because I know doing the internship, learning source control and checking in and out was not a huge learning curve, but it's definitely something to get used to.
But here it's that learning curve plus the software. And you have to, each piece of software for Git is a little bit different. There are multiple apps that you can use to upload. I always have grand plans, but the project always gets in the way. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get there. I think I actually requested that be a summer course that the experts on that stuff teach. There's all kinds of them in the technical college system, and they just teach a little mini course, a 2-day thing on how to use Git, but I haven't seen that course yet. Putting mine on the desktop, you can put yours wherever you want. And we could add an icon to it, but I'll save that for some other day. And notice what got created over here. We now have 2 views, a master view and a detail view. And let's take a look at the storyboard. And now that I know how to shrink it, I'll shrink it. And I'm going to turn off my auto layout stuff because I'm still not real happy with it. So I got 3 things. The first 2 we've already seen before, sort of. I have a master controller, a navigation controller that puts a nav bar on top of every one of my views. Notice they all have the same one. They have basically the same one, but it's customized for each view, for each scene, the technical term. Okay. And what's cool about the master view controller, I want to call it the builder. When we chose that option, I want a master detail app. It did a lot of work for us. It created the nav controller. It made the table view part of the nav controller. This thing's called a Segue. Kind of like the movie terms, right? We go from scene to scene. How do we shift from one scene to another with a segue? S-E-G-U-E. That was built for us. I think it's in the next unit where we learn how to create our own. This can be customized. It's an object. You can click on it and start changing things. We got a table view. This is actually a table view controller now. This is one of those controllers that has nothing in it but a table view that's full size. We also already have one prototype. We saw in the last recording how we could have done that with our table view, but we just picked it, we wrote it in code. Say use value 1 type table view or cells. Here, we're defining a prototype cell, and we can click on the title here and go to the properties and tweak it so that it's a different kind of, got to get the prototype cells, I want to get the right one. It's the table view, still don't have the prototype. Where'd it go? There, I got it. Clicked out here someplace and I finally got it so that on the arrow maybe, there we go. Basic cell type, and notice it has a disclosure indicator. That's this little arrow. It's just a visual clue. It's just an icon that tells the user you can click on this and it'll go over there to the next page. It'll segue to the next page. All these things are already tied together. This table view already has all the required methods and even the optional ones for the prototype for a table view. This table view controller is already designated as the delegate for this table view. If I click on the table view and go here, the delegate is all tied into the master table view controller. All that stuff is already tied in. Same stuff we kind of did in that tutorial. We didn't do it right. Now it's done right, tied together. And there's a detail view, and this detail view isn't much, it's just a title. And it has a label down here that displays details. We're going to expand on that. We're going to expand on all of this, but you can run this. Those of you who aren't updating your operating systems or your betas, you can run it, and hopefully it'll still work. Should. You created it using that beta, should function. All of this stuff has already been defined for us. Here's my master list. If you click on plus, this is insert a row. This is really lame. It inserts the date and time. And if you click it again, it inserts the date and time. Just an example. So that when you click on plus, it does something. But notice that my nav bar includes a plus, so we'll have to figure out how that was done. Includes an edit button. If you choose edit, then icons show up and you can delete one of these. And that changes with every version of iOS. They do it differently. And when you're done, you click done because you can't click on these anymore. And whenever you want to, you can click on one of these and notice there's the indicator. It'll go off to the detail view and show you the details about that, whatever that means in this case. Nothing. Okay. But that one time, it was one time, okay, that one time was transferred from the master view to the detail view. How'd they do that? Ugh. The nav bar has changed to detail view, and now there's a button that says go back. Where'd that come from? Pretty much automatic because of the segue. This word here, master, comes from the name of the other control or the other view. If we change it, it'll change. So all of this was already built, and as Nick said when we were talking about why is it putting this lame stuff in here, just to show you that it can be done and this is ready to work. And our job now is to tweak this. So the first thing I want to do is just create a class so that I can have multiple objects in my master table view and then have some detail to show when I switch to the detail view. You could just hard code it, but I think it makes a whole lot more sense to have a class. So let's create a new class. And this is where I end up going back to my notes because the Swift syntax is a little new, but I have practiced, so that's why I look like I know what I'm doing here. I want to add a new file. Add a Swift file. So I've got to go to iOS, I think it's source Swift file. If you do OS X, that means you're writing an application for your iMac, not for your phones. OS X is different. Next, what do you want to call it? The name of the class is going to be family member. Create it. And there it is. And I like to put all my classes first, just so I can see them a little bit better, and then my view controllers and storyboards. You can rearrange these to your heart's content. Somehow Xcode keeps track of the order that you put them in. It just stores them wherever it needs to. We're not controlling where they're stored. We're simply controlling how they're displayed here. So now we have an empty file, and in here we can create a class. So let's create a class and call it family member. And I think that was a curly bracket, right? Inside there, we can create properties. So I want family member's first name, and I'm going to initialize that to the empty string so it's implicitly typed. And a last name. And or birth date, because that's what this is going to track. This is kind of our birth date tracker. And for right now, I'm going to make that a string. I don't have a whole lot of time today, but what I've been working on in my office is my own date class, because I'm sick of using NSDate. And so it's a wrapper class is what they call it. It basically is an NSDate with my stuff around it, so I can just call it a date. And I've been working on that, and I have a basic version of it right now, but I'm having a couple of flaws. I was going to ask you to help me with them, but it's too late today. So what we're going to do right now is just create this, and those are my properties, and inside there I think I'll create a function. Pardon me?
Do you need the semicolons?
No. but I've been writing in C#, so it'd be nice to just work in one language. That's Nick. The rest of you are now getting ready to do JavaScript, and that's where semicolons are coming from and the rest. Build a function here real quick. We'll call it full name. I could have used one of those calculated property things instead. I'll use a function. Full name, and it doesn't require any parameters, but it returns a string. No, not an NS string. And we can just return the first name plus a space plus the last name. And if we needed anything else, we could add that to it. But for right now, we'll go with that. Because what I need is something to send to my Tableview adapter to say, this is what I want you to display in each cell in the table. So that method is how I want them displayed. If I'd rather have them displayed last name, first name, I could create another method and use that instead. But what I've defined that method for is simply so that I have something very convenient to send to the table and say, this is what I want you to display in the cell. That should be good enough. I think I'm going to do a save just to be careful. By the way, you notice these turn gray. The programming term nowadays for those is dirty. They're dirty files, meaning they haven't been saved. So if it's gray, it's dirty, you need to save it to be sure.
They call it forms, like how you update your form. If it's been saved, it's called a dirty form. Like if the form is dirty, then show the save button.
Oh, okay.
So
Yep.
that's what we call it.
When the data's been changed on the form, you mean? Yep.
Yep.
You see that term a lot. All right, going back to my notes here real quick because I kind of flew through some stuff here. Many of the details have already been taken care of it. We saw a lot of this, but we didn't dig into the code. There's nothing in the app delegate. We may change that. It's a bunch of predefined code, but if you looked at the other code of the apps that you generated before, they have the same placeholders where you can write code for when we resign, when we enter the background, that kind of stuff. Don't need anything out of there. If we go to the master view control, let's go to the detail view controller first, because it's pretty simple. Here's the code for the detail view controller. It had a label on it, remember? Already gave us an outlet to the label so we can put stuff in the label. What if you want 3 text boxes and 2 labels? Then you redefine that view. It's just a view. You take the label out and you put your own text boxes and segments and sliders and whatever you want on there, you put them on there. And then you have to provide, of course, your own outlets to them. And if you want them to respond to events and stuff, you don't need to. But if you want them to respond to events, then you respond. You create the actions as well. I found this interesting. The class has a variable, a property basically, that is of any type. Interesting. But that's not what I'm messing with. So let's change the any type. This is risky because we're going to have some errors. To what are we messing with? Family members. This goes back to that namespace conversation we were having last hour. Don't I have to somehow link this to the family? No, as long as it's in the project, you can refer to the family member.
In the newest version, I edited it and it works.
Pardon me?
I edited the code in the newest version and it's working.
It's working right away.
Yep.
Yeah, it shouldn't, because there's a few other places here where things can get kind of, well, any object and family member ought to play well together, but they don't seem to be. But what this says is if somebody's changing this detail item, like who? Like the master? If this gets changed, go ahead and configure the view, and the configure view then sets up and copies stuff into the label. Now here we tweak some stuff, so I'm going to change this to family member and see if that resolves the issue. Okay. And here it says, give me the detail. Here what we've said here is, let's call the detail record that family member. And it's the same thing as this guy up here. Well, now that it's a family member, it doesn't have a description really, because we didn't code anything for description. But we could change the label and say, give me the detail, come on, should have left that there. dot, and I can grab any of those pieces parts, including the full name method. So just for grins, because we don't have the birth date anywhere else, let's use the birth date. What we've said here is whenever it's time to change the view, grab the birth date from the detail record that hopefully has been sent to you, grab the birth date, and go ahead and throw that in the label. You're not stuck with one line here. Here's an if statement. It says, if this works, then assign it to detail. And if it works, process the rest of this, make a label if the label, and this if statement doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless there's no detail description label. Okay. We could do the same thing we saw in the last one and just take this if statement out and say that the self dot, the self is who? Self is wait a minute. Self dot detail description label. Oh, that's this guy right there. Why self?
So that's the detail view controller?
It's the view controller. Couldn't we leave that out? We have been. Okay, because this is a variable. Do we really need to designate self? I saw something or I heard something in one of my classes once upon a time that said you really ought to put that self in there. Just in case there's confusion. Self.detail item is a family member. This is a family member. What's your problem?
You deleted a question mark
you
on
need
line
to-
16.
On line 16, there was a question mark, meaning if it doesn't work, keep going. It's an optional it's an optional thing. So we could transfer. Why would that happen? Why would I transfer to this details view and not send it anything?
Maybe it doesn't know that you would be transferring. Maybe you started the detail.
I'm not sure if that's the answer I'm looking for. Why would I transfer to this view and not send it anything? Think of your Visual Studio projects.
How about when it's initializing?
You're
and
creating a
sending
brand
it?
new one. There's no data to send you because it's brand new. What we did last year is we created a new one, filled it with empty junk, and then sent it. This year, I might try doing that a little different, say I'm not sending you anything. And now this is nothing, which means this is nothing, and the screen ends up doing nothing except leaving empty text boxes. That might work very nicely. Good. Then what? So what does it do? It says, grab me that detail item. Here's a pointer to the label. Couldn't I just change the label directly? Probably. Change its text to the birth date. It's just a label now. We're away from the table. We're in that details view. There's no table anymore. It's just a label. Could just be a text view. It could be a slider. Just do all the stuff you did in Unit 4. View did load. Once we load it, configure the view. Hopefully this is already there. Why they're both there, I don't quite understand. Okay, because this is view did load. And this is somebody filled it in for me on the did set. Do I really need both? Seems to me that I don't, unless the view never really gets let loose, which is possible, that we transfer from one to the other and then come back. And the other view's still there so that we can switch back to it. It hasn't been wiped out. But if we change its data, then we want to reconfigure what's displayed. So that's a possibility why that's happening. And the did receive memory warning. We've been deleting them. Every example I see still has it. What does it do? Whatever the superclass says to do whenever you run out of memory. But you could write your own if you wanted to. If you don't delete it and you run out of memory, then your iPhone throws a fit and gives you some ugly message that nobody understands. So the detail, a lot of that was set up for us. We just had to tweak it for the class that we're using. It was set up to use any class. Couldn't we have just left it? Yeah, kind of. Except when we get down here, how do I get the birth date out of my family member if it's an any class? I think we'd have to convert the any class into a family member somehow. And I just think it makes more sense to customize this for your application.
What if you wanted to return multiple things?
You're going to return multiple things from this detail view? Like what?
Say, even though you clicked on their name, you still want to see the name and the detail with the birth date and
What I anticipate doing with this before we're done is all three objects from that class, because I sent it one object, right? An entire family member is going to be sent to this. An entire family member gets sent to this details view. I'm just grabbing one piece. I could change this and say, okay, add another label, display the name, add another label, display the last name.
So would you just do like label 2.text?
No, I would define them with nice names, just like you did in Unit 4. Right? All you have to do is go to the detail view controller in the storyboard. This is just a label.
Oh, that's one label that's there. Right?
That's just
Sorry.
one label that they gave for us. Right?
I didn't know if
Yep.
there was one there. It makes more sense now.
Now it's just a label that they gave with us. This detail stuff goes here. They did that.
Got it.
But you can add any of the other toys that you got in your toy box, to this view and then start filling those. All in the same place though. When we go back to the code, go in the same place right here, or probably right under there. If this works, then fill it up because we got stuff. If it didn't work, that means it's an empty one. Leave them alone, leave them in their initial state, whatever that would be for text boxes and labels and sliders and stuff.
It's just that they give a junky name at top, so they do a if let label equal detailed description label.
That's to say if the label's there. I don't know why it wouldn't be.
If we delete it and don't update the code,
Yeah, well then dummy, change your code. I probably wouldn't do that. Let's see if I can do it the way if I would want to do it. That's command / is it here? Yep. I would say, if I have a detail member, that makes sense to me, then change the detail description label. Change its text to be equal to the detail record dot birth date.
I'll go up there and change its name. LBL birthday.
There you go. Even better, because I'm probably not keeping that anyways. You're right. Change his name. So he wants to change it. Can I do that very simply just by typing in here? Probably.
You can if you double click on it.
If I double click on it,
Yep. And then keep over it, double click.
it's
There's an arrow that pops to the right.
yeah.
Edit
Yeah.
all in
And
scope.
then you can edit all in sight. Scope.
And make it LBL birth date.
Yeah.
Cool.
It did disconnect it though.
Did it? Yeah, there's no connection anymore. So that's annoying. That's what I get for renaming it. But you're probably just going to delete it and start over again. Now I gotta wait for the helper to come up.
Mine's still connected.
Yours is? I must have done it wrong. No assistant. Well, I'm in code, dummy. Okay, so now it's back again. So, any more questions about, but notice you can go to it directly and you can put a self in the front of it. And now you said yours, self dot. So again, I have to do a little more research to see really it's not necessary, obviously.
Why did they do that if statement in the first place?
The first one, to double check to make sure there's really a label there.
The second one,
This one,
like.
yeah, to make sure the label's really there.
But did you already do that?
What they're doing is creating a short name for the label. But the let command says, and the if statement says, if this works, keep going. If it fails, why would my label fail? Because like Nick said before we left, in case I delete it. Well, if you delete it, it changed the code. I don't know why. Except they're trying to give us a generic starting point. And maybe you did delete it and you don't know what this is doing. Well, at least the code will still execute. I don't think you need it. So I'm going to remove it so you don't accidentally copy it. And I don't think you need the self either. Whether that clarifies or speeds things up, I doubt it, because this is an optimizing compiler. If it's more optimal to put the word self there, it'll probably add it for me. I hope. Okay, so we've tweaked the detail view just a little. This is where you're gonna do more tweaking. You add more objects and make it look pretty and go on. And we'll talk about more of that more later, not today. Let's go take a look at the master view controller now and see what we got there. Whew, it's a little more code and I got an error, but that's because my detail view controller doesn't want a generic object anymore, it wants a family object. So we'll have to tweak this too, and we will. But let's see what it created. Here's my, first of all, notice it's a UI table view controller. It's not a view controller, it's a table view controller, which means it's optimized and it has all the fancy stuff in it to manage to control a table. And we also saw that it is already the delegate, it is already the data source. That was done for us. They've created an array, an NS mutable array. How about in the new one? Still NS mutable array? Okay. This is what we're going to tweak, and we're going to call it family members or just members, and we're going to create a regular array instead of an NS mutable array. We'll create a Swift array, and we'll fill it with stuff. In this unit, we're going to have a fixed array. When the program starts, there'll be 10 family members in there, or however many we decide to create. And every time you run this program, you get 10 family members. In part 2 of the program, you'll be able to tweak it and insert new members while it's running, delete members while it's running. But as soon as you end the program, it forgets and starts over. Sounds familiar, right? Assignment tracker? That's what the assignment tracker did until we tied it to a file or until we tied it to a database. And that's Unit 6. So for right now, we're just demonstrating the concepts. And then once we tie it to a database, we can update the database. So this is just an array that stores my contents. My sample data. Awake from nib, what's it for? Who knows? What's a nib? It's old, like really old, because they were renamed Zibs with an X about 4 years ago. Nibs went away and Zibs came in, but they still call them nibs because Zibs are too hard to pronounce with X's on it, I guess. And now that's gone away in their scenes. That's your scene. So when we wake up from some other nib, do whatever we're supposed to do. I'm not removing that one. Could be dangerous. View did load. What the heck is this? To me, add a navigation item, a button on the left that is the edit button. That's how the button got there. Ta-da, done. Now we've got code that we can steal. Here's another one. Make another button. Make it a UI button. What kind of button? A system add button. And when you click on it, do this action. Call that method. So this is linking it. We created the button, told it what kind of button you are. You're the plus sign, the add button, and immediately said, whenever somebody clicks on it, insert new method, call this method. And we'll see that method has been defined. None of this is magic. Not all of this is simply changing the nav bar as we go. And these are predefined buttons. And this says, okay, the right button on the nav bar, make it this guy. Could we have combined these and just stuck that down there? Maybe. Maybe. There's limits to some of the things Swift will let you combine like we did in C#.
I think it reads better like that.
It reads good this way. Right? Make me a button and then make it the right button on your nav bar. That's fine. Memory warning we don't do anything with. Insert a new object. There's the method that was linked to that.
Why is it in quotes up top? Is that just the way it is?
That's the syntax.
It's like reflection, isn't it?
I don't know if it's reflection. It's a string, and ultimately it's going to go try to find a method with that string name and link the two to get magic. That's the syntax. If you want to understand it, that's a
It's not
different
wrong, it's just odd.
Yeah.
To me.
Seems odd. But if you put the method name in there, you're basically calling the method, aren't you?
Yeah.
And then what are you doing? Then you're calling a method that defines which method you're going to link this to. Whoa, no. That's why the quotes are there. To say, literally use this method. So it executes this method. This method says, insert a new object into my NS mutable array. This is how you add an item to the mutable array. What are we adding? A date, the current date. Where? At the top, at index 0. We're going to change that to make it array speak in Swift. We do basically the same thing. Then, this adds it to the array. This adds it to the table view. Remember, the table view is simply a reflection of what's in our array. Our array has all the data in it. In the future, that'll be a database. It has all the data in it. The table view simply reflects what's in there. We tell it how to reflect, what the reflection should look like. Same thing you kind of did in the lookup grid in C#. I don't want to see the entire record of a DVD, I just want the title. I don't want to see the entire record of one of my family members, I just want their name, the birth dates, and the detail screen. Right, and we can make the class as complex as we want it to be. So this adds it to the array, and now we're creating a new row in the table and adding the same thing. Updating the table to reflect the change we just made to the array. And we're going to steal that code and tweak it. Prepare for Segue, that's interesting. Segue is when you move from one screen to the other. What I still haven't quite got my head around yet is how when I click the plus button, not the plus button, how when I click on a row, does it know that I need to go to the next page? I think that somewhere in this, if I click on my table view or the row, that there's a connection, there it is, that says push. The push command says go to the next page. Whenever you do a push command, the prepare, I haven't gotten this far in my notes yet, but it's coming back to me. Whenever you issue a push command, the prepare for Segue method is automatically executed. So here's my prepare for Segue. And then it wants to know who. Am I segueing to show detail? Because I could have this form linked to 6 different forms. And 6 different buttons take me to 6 different places. Here there's only one, so the if statement's kind of redundant, but it's a good check to make sure. If the identifier is show the detail screen, then go get me the information from the array that matches the row they just clicked on, and then segue to the other screen. Here's what you were asking me before about, Justin. See this mark? It used to be called a pragma mark, and pragma just got to be too long, I guess. So mark just means this is a region, to use C# speak. It's a region. And this is just a comment, but the nice thing about these is you can collapse them. I think so. No?
No.
Thought I could. Then what's the point? Except to mark it, why don't I just use a comment?
I thought I saw maybe you could skip to it, like in your, it's going to be labeled somewhere in your method.
Okay, it might be a way to jump there someplace,
Yeah.
but that's your regions. And here are the table view prototypes. We've seen this one. How many rows? We didn't see this one because it was optional. How many sections? We could delete that and it would work fine because we only have one section. But if you want to have multiple sections, you can. Each section can have different cell layouts. Each section can share something, all kinds of things you can do there. Here's our cell. What do we want to display? We're going to have to tweak that. Cell for row at index path. Here's the can edit. Because we have a delete button now, we have to designate whether we can delete this row. I think that one can be removed. By default, every row is editable. And then finally, when the user says do it, what do I do? If they said delete, then remove it from the array and remove it from the table. So we added a couple methods because we have some new features. Good overview, we'll play with it some more next time, and we got to tweak it because we got an error, but that's because I changed the type of my detail, but I haven't changed it here yet. So that's where we're going.